It's okay, baby. We're safe. We're safe. Hey, we need help.
Stop!
Please. It's my daughter. I think her leg is broken.
Stop right there!
Okay. We're not sick.
Got a couple of civilians in the outer perimeter. Please advise.
Daddy, what about Uncle Tommy?
We're gonna get you to safety and go back for him, okay?
Sir, there's a little girl. But... Yes, sir.
Listen, buddy, we've just been through hell. Okay, we just need... Shit. Please don't. Oh, no. Sarah. Move your hands, baby. I know, baby, I know. God. Listen to me. I know this hurts, baby. You're gonna be okay, baby. Stay with me. All right, I'm gonna pick you up. I know, baby. I know it hurts. Come on, baby, please. I know, baby. I know. Sarah. Baby.
The Last of Us, a historical game first created in 2013 that has made a huge impact on the universe of video games. Now, this heartfelt story is available for everyone to witness, with the new HBO series finishing Season 1. At the moment of creating this video, Season 2 has been set to launch in 2025. Hello everyone, this is my human subject for today's video, and I will torture him. Not physically, and not by my own hand technically. I'm just making this human, and I will put him through all the effects that this Cordiceps does to a human body in the universe of The Last of Us. And as you will all look at him slowly turning more and more into an infected, I'll talk about why all the concepts in The Last of Us are so amazing and inspiring. For anyone watching my video and confused as to what I'm talking about, I'll give you a brief explanation of what The Last of Us is and what's been made so far since 2013. The Last of Us is basically a classic zombie game where your goal is to survive and follow the story. But it's much more than that, honestly. So I'll bring you all on this, frankly, awesome journey. So what's been made so far? Obviously, there's been the video games, multiple of them. There's been concept books. There's been the HBO series. There's been even like a wiki fandom. That website has a lot of details. So if you guys want to learn much more about everything that's going on in The Last of Us, I recommend you go check out that website. I'll link it down below. And there's been a ton of videos and art all over the place about The Last of Us. It has a huge impact on today's society. So much so that we have cool cosplays about the main characters and about the infected. We even have more female characters in media. It was still quite sexist though at that time, so it didn't do much, but it helped a bit. And also it helped a lot of people go through mental health issues. So it's been pretty positive actually. And it's a really cool universe, so hang on tight while I ramble for the next 30 or so minutes. The Last of Us came out on June 14th, 2013. And you get to play as Joel, which is the main character of the story. And it follows the story 20 years later, after the initial impact. And we discover how Joel lived his life during that time with Tess, and how both of them have now a new mission to bring Ellie to another part of the USA, to the Fireflies. We learn very fast that Ellie is actually immune to the infection that's been spreading for the last 20 years. And that's just such a cool concept. So many zombie media is very fast-paced, and I think it's so creative to make it feel real, how it lasts for actually more than a decade, and how it's still very hard to live with. So that's just really cool. And gosh, every time I play the beginning of the game or I just watch, I cannot stop myself and not cry. It's so harsh, but it's so well made. The emotions are raw and it's beautiful. And soon after, on February 14th, 2014, we get Left Behind, which is a prequel of the first game, and it adds on way more about the story of how we learned that Ellie is actually immune, and about her also first lover slash best friend. We get to discover how also they got infected, and it's another really sad story. One day Riley and Ellie went and got into a mall, and sadly they disturbed some infected, and both of them got infected at the same time. And Riley says,
"We could just be all poetic and shit and lose our minds together."
And again, it's so sad, but it's so good. And also in Left Behind, we get to play a bit more also of Ellie. As I said before, there wasn't much female main characters in the media at that time, especially non-sexy ones. It's such a breath of fresh air to see just a regular girl. And then, about 6 years later, we get The Last of Us Part 2 on June 19th. 2020. And again, it's another sad game. Who would have thought? We get to see more about what happened to Ellie and Joel as time moved between going back to Jackson with Tommy and that whole gang, and what happens in the beginning of the game, essentially, where, spoiler alert, Joel dies. But I love how The Last of Us Part 2 is viewed as such a black and white game. And what I mean by that is you won't see many people say that they both like and hate it, or they enjoyed it just like a regular game. A lot of people are very either in love, they love the story, they love the characters, and you'll meet a lot of people also who absolutely despise this game. And I respect both of them. I'm not gonna lie, I love this game, but I don't like the story. But it's not about the story that I'm talking about. It's about the concept. It's about the universe of it, how well made it is. So after The Last of Us Part 2 was made, they remade The Last of Us Part 1 in September 2, 2022, 2 years after Part 2, so that it's more seamless. And recently I saw that they had a remastered version for The Last of Us Part 2. We follow the characters of Ellie. Ironically, we follow also Joel through his flashbacks, and we follow Abby, the one where her life essentially crumbled when her father died trying to make a cure. The next update, we got an HBO adaptation made on January 15, 2023, and I'm not gonna lie, it's an amazing remake of The Last of Us. It's honestly very well made. I don't know how to explain it. Even though I played the game, I deeply enjoyed the series because I got to see parts that we don't see much in the video game. Of course, I'm sad because we see way less of the infected, which is my favorite part. But we get to see much more of the characters. We get to see so much more, I feel like, of the emotions that they portray. And the final installment of The Last of Us that we have for now is the new HBO series for season 2 that is set to premiere in 2025. And there's been 2 concept art books that came out, and those are beautiful. We see a lot of art on the people, on the environments, on the animals, and a bit on the infected. I will say this loud and clear, nothing makes me feel more angry than not having more talks, more discussions, more anything about the infected. That's my favorite part of the game. It's the whole game. It's because that we have those infected that we have this game. And I know that Joel and Ellie and everyone in is like, we follow their story and all, but I don't really care about them. I really just care about how the infected got there. But yeah, that's just my personal opinion. Now let's talk about the music in this game. It's honestly one of the most beautiful soundtracks that has been made, and that's just my personal opinion, but the creator is called Gustavo Santaolalla. I think that's how you pronounce it, but I might be wrong, so please do not bully me too hard. He is the famous creator of The Last of Us Part 1, Part 2, Left Behind, and he also made the music in the HBO series, if I remember. And honestly, I'll link down below a playlist on Spotify. If I can find one on YouTube, I'm also gonna link that one, but it's just so beautiful. I honestly put it when I read, and gosh, I can't explain how beautiful it is. Next up, we got the clicker sounds. Misty Lee and Philip Kovacs are the male and female creators of the sounds that the clickers make. And can we take a second of just how awesome people that do that as like a living, they have to get creative with like sounds for movies and video games. I don't know, it's just such an awesome job. And it's just so bone chilling. Every time I hear them, I'm instantly stressed. And they're the ones that made the Part 1, Part 2, and the ones in the HBO series as well. So that's just really cool. They stick to the same people for pretty much all the media they made. And finally, I am talking about the voice actors. Not all of them, because that's not what my video is about, but I'm talking about Joel Miller and Ellie. So the voice actor of Ellie is called Ashley Johnson, and she's part of a group. They're a D&D group. I cannot remember for the life of me, but they're really cool, and she makes a lot of cool characters as a voice actor. And for Joel, his name is Troy Baker. And funny story about that, apparently when they went for the voice actor castings, he was second guessing everything. He really wasn't sure, and people there weren't even sure if he could make the part, because he does not look nearly as much as Joel. He doesn't look like it. Sometimes for the voice actors, they try to make people that look a bit like the characters that have in mind, apparently. And his voice is just spot on. He's essentially the voice of Pedro Pascal, but in a different skin.
Joel! Why are you doing this? Get the fuck off me!
A lot of the other voice actors too, for Tess, I think for Abby, they have the voice actor also for Marlene, and a couple others. They do cameos on the HBO series. And my favorite ones obviously are the ones for Ashley Johnson, because she plays the mother of Ellie in The Last of Us HBO series. And Troy Baker plays a side character that we see a lot with David. And it's so cool. It's very, very awesome. Where The Last of Us is set is classically in the USA. Everything happens there for whatever reason. But we get to follow Joel and Ellie all throughout the USA. Don't ask me where they are and stuff like that. I don't know much about the details, and I'm Canadian. I don't really care about all the states in the USA. it's cool to know that, but what's even cooler is that for the HBO series to really give that American feeling, they filmed most of their parts in Alberta, Canada.
The whole world is talking about The Last of Us, the hit 2013 video game that spun off into a TV series. HBO spent more than $10 million per episode, making it one of the most expensive TV shows to shoot, and the episodes are averaging over 30 million viewers. And while you've heard of the show, you probably didn't know it was entirely filmed in Alberta, Canada.
Yeah! But for real though, I find just that fact a bit funny because it proves that we're better. No, but for real, it's a little fun fact. And for part 2, also set in the USA, I don't remember where they're going, but it's a revenge, so they don't really care where they're going. All Ellie wants to do and Abby is kill each other. You know? And now for the survivors. There's a lot, so buckle in. I'm gonna try to be as brief as I can because even for me it's really confusing. So there are groups of survivors. So we got Fedra, Fireflies, Seraphites, also known as Scars, the Washington Liberation Front, also known as WLF, or also called Wolf, the Rattlers, and then we got like the little random ones like the Hunters, Bandits, and Cannibals. I don't remember which one of these we see in part 1 or part 2. All I know is that they do stuff. They're not good people, most of them. And then we got more important groups that we learn in the story. Let's start with David's group. And he's a sick asshole. He is so vile, but he's not intense. You feel uneasy when you meet him in the beginning, and you're not too sure if he's actually like a bad person or if he's just another survivor. And the more you talk to him and get to learn about him, you trust him a bit more. And then it hits you in the face at the end where he's a maniac cannibal, and we have a lot of suspicions that he was also a child molester, because why not? Next up, we have Henry and Sam. We meet them right before meeting Tommy and Jackson, and they're sweet. They're really nice. They're brothers, essentially. A younger and older brother traveling together. They were in a group, and then once they entered the city, they got separated, and now they're trying to make their way back to like a tower. And sadly, Sam gets infected, and Henry just cannot live with the fact that he killed his brother, so he stops his suffering suddenly. I don't know what I can put on YouTube, so I'm just gonna say that and those words, but it's very sad. Again, a lot of sad things forever. And then we got Maria's community, which is with Tommy. She's his new wife, and she's the one that lives in Jackson. They have a whole power system with water, and that's where we also begin our story in part 2, and it's really well thought. Once again, I'm going to talk about the concepts here. The idea of having like a small community, it's really cool to see that. And like I said, the game is set in the first one 20 years in the future, and now it's more years in the future. It's not that many, but I think it's like 5 or 6 or something. And last but definitely not least, I'm going to talk about Bill and Frank. In the video game universe, we only see Bill and how he's kind of an asshole all the time. But once you get to know him a bit better, you clearly see how he's just a scared man trying to live his best. And his idea of surviving is to be alone, to not depend on anyone, because if you depend on someone else, then it'll only bring suffering once they die. And we get a glimpse of Frank in the video game, but we really don't get much. Honestly, when I first played the game, I thought they were just like neighbors or something, and they were big assholes to each other. But once the TV series got out, that's honestly my favorite episode to watch, and I can't stop crying every time I watch it. It's such a beautiful display of love and trust, and it's also a breath of fresh air to see a gay couple not portrayed as like two sex objects that are like so put out to be aesthetically pleasing and perfect. It's an apocalyptic setting. I don't know, they feel just so genuine and so in love with each other. The actors are so amazing. Yeah, like I said, every time I watch that episode, I just cry because I cannot put myself back. And I recently replayed the game, and knowing what I saw in the TV series, it made me feel different about Bill's situation in the game. I could see more how sad he was, but it's still not as clearly shown as in the HBO series, but kudos to them. It's so beautiful.
I was never afraid before you showed up.
And now, finally, the icing on the cake. I'll finally start talking about my favorite thing about this whole universe. The infected in The Last of Us. All throughout the video, I've shown you some parts of my torturing on my human subject, and I'll be able to explain you guys better of what this human has been going through. I'll have to start at the beginning though. What makes The Last of Us the best zombie interpretation media, in my opinion, is the fact that they chose to stick to realism. In a lot of media, it's very easy to see that it just can't exist and then you move on. But in The Last of Us, they had the brilliant idea to use cordyceps. And not just any cordyceps. And it's called Cordiceps unilateralis. And that is a very real cordyceps that exists in our world. They're also called the zombie ant cordyceps. It's essentially a fungi that infects its subject, making them basically die from the inside out. And how the creators had this idea, they watched an episode of like National Geographics or something like that about the cordyceps fungi, and that cordyceps can infect over 600 types of insects, if I remember. So not only ants are victims, but spiders and a bunch of other insects can just turn into a zombie-like form, and they'll do their best to spread that disease. But don't worry, that's not in fact our reality right now. It cannot infect us. It can only infect very small insects. So you're safe for now, but in the video game universe, it is spread mostly via biting and airborne fungal spores. So that's why you see a lot of them wear gas masks. And the origin of the infection in the game comes from a contaminated crop in South America, and apparently 6 months later, about 60% of the population is either killed or infected. So that does not leave a lot of people to stay alive. So essentially it's via food that the first people got diseased. And in the HBO series, they made it a bit different. More people say it's more realistic, but I'm gonna say it's less realistic, but I still very, very like the idea. It's still a cordyceps, but it's also a mix of another fungi called mycelium, and it's really just like a mushroom that looks like veins. But the way that it infects people in the HBO series, you get actually all the information in the first episode.
There's a fungus that infects insects, gets inside an ant, for example, travels through its circulatory system to the ant's brain and then floods it with hallucinogens, thus bending the ant's mind to its will.
Fungal infection of this kind is real, but not in humans.
True, fungi cannot survive if its host's internal temperature is over 94 degrees. And currently there are no reasons for fungi to evolve to be able to withstand higher temperatures. But what if that were to change? What if, for instance, the world were to get slightly warmer? Well, now, there is reason to evolve. One gene mutates, and an Ascomycetia, Candida, ergot, Cordyceps, Aspergillus, any one of them could become capable of burrowing into our brains and taking control, not of millions of us, but billions of us. Billions of puppets with poisoned minds, permanently fixed on one unifying goal: to spread the infection to every last human alive by any means necessary. And there are no treatments for this, no preventatives, no cures. They don't exist. It's not even possible to make them.
So if that happens,
we lose.
Which, chef's kiss once again. I absolutely love that reporter just saying, but what if it can withstand the heat? Ugh. Essentially, it comes from Jakarta, Indonesia, and it infected crops such as like wheat and stuff, and it got through yeast products such as flour. And all throughout the first episode, you can see people just eating cookies, eating cakes. And if you look closely, you'll see that the main characters keep dodging those. And after that, it infected a lot of people again. And in the HBO series, it's also spread through biting and body liquids. I don't remember how it's actually properly called, but you can see there's a scene where we see Tess having like a kiss with an infected, and you can see the mycelium just spreading through her mouth. It's a really cool scene, but doesn't really work like that. I like to be realistic, but I know that they did that so that it's just better for the series, I mean. But still, it's really, really cool. After that, the infection pretty much stays the same for both the video game and the HBO series. And now I'll get to talk way more about the infected. Yeah. So, first, you're a human. So that's where you start. And for example, you start up at the beginning of the infection. So you decided to eat a nice cake, but damn, that cake feels weird in the stomach. So you start to feel angry, not too sure what's going on. Everything's pretty blurry. That's the first stage. The first stage is also called runners. What the runners do is they are fast. So they're pretty much pumped with adrenaline right now, trying to fight their instincts. You can see some of them just staying still and fighting their thoughts. They're being tortured literally from the inside out by their brain. Their brains aren't working super well, and they can see, not as well. They don't see much, but they can see stuff. Their eyes are still functioning, so don't get too close to them, but you can still sneak up on them pretty good. And they look so good. Bloodshot eyes, mucus, blood, and you can see the veins popping out. They're already pretty pale at that point. So the runners. Runners are people who recently turned into infected. They are defined by their intense speed, sluggish attacks, and tendency to attack people in hordes. And then, actually, the stages follow each other, but not within minutes or hours, which is such a cool concept. Okay, second stage, my least favorite one, because gosh darn it, it's so scary. They're called the Stalkers. So essentially, they're still pumped with adrenaline, they're hella fast, but now the Cordiceps has grown more, and they can't quite see as well. They still can see you though, but not as well as the runners. So you can see how the cordyceps is just growing out of their faces and heads, how pale they look, how discomforting they feel to look at. You can see how sad and uncomfortable they feel in their body. They're stuck in this tortured body, forcing them to do stuff. They're not there anymore, by the way. So don't think that they're trapped and they can get back to their former selves. They're gone. They're long gone. And we see a few of them in the games. I don't think we see them in the HBO series, but they are so scary. Every time I play this game, fun fact, I cannot for the life of me play horror games because I am so scared of everything. So a lot of parts in games, I need my boyfriend to help me, or else it takes months to finish. It took me I think a year to finish The Last of Us, the first game. That's before I met my boyfriend, so that was long. I had to wait for my cousins to help me out with that one. But I did my best this time. I did it again, but it was still scary and I still needed my boyfriend's help. So the stalkers are my nightmares. Yeah. Stalkers are people who have been infected from somewhere between 2 weeks to a year. Per their name, they stalk stalk and hide from prey in the dark, and they attack at opportune moments. Some also latch onto walls and allow the cordyceps to fester, keeping the host alive until prey walks by, at which point the stalker breaks free and attacks, which is what we can see with the Rat King. It's a stalker. It's like a super stalker that's stuck to its leg. It's very scary. Now we get to the third stage. The clickers. Honestly, the clickers can't see anything. As you can see, the fungal has pretty much taken over their faces, but their bodies are like, hey, instead of seeing, you'll just hear better. Yeah. So they develop essentially a sort of echolocation style, such as bats. So they do clicking sounds to locate more their victims. So when you play this game, you can't sneak up regularly on them. You have to be very soft and look where you put your feet, or else they'll hear you. And they make it feel so stressful in this game. Every time, all throughout the beginning to the end of this game, the clickers are still very strong. You don't feel overpowered over them because you get stronger. They're still a very deadly enemy to encounter, and it's really, really cool. And you can see how their bodies aren't theirs anymore. They're all discolored. There's so much blood on them. They're basically pale. They have more cordyceps growing all over their body, not just on their face. And it's very unsettling to see and hear. You do not want to get close to that one. Clickers are people who have been infected for at least 1 year. The long time elapse has allowed the fungus to spread all over their bodies, blinding them and forcing them to use echolocation to find prey. However, the fungus has granted them enhanced strength, making them fearsome foes in close quarter combats. And then before going to the last stage, we're going to another stage that we see more in The Last of Us Part 2, and they're called the Shamblers. If I remember, we only meet one of them, and they're pretty similar to the other last form called the Bloaters, but the main difference is that instead of being years and years old in a drier environment, the Shamblers are in a wet environment. So the Cordyceps basically morph into, like, not corals, but a more sea form type of fungi. And you can just see how wet this Shambler looks. It's so ugh. Shamblers are people who have been infected for several years and typically inhabit areas thriving with water. While not as physically enhanced as clickers or bloaters, Shamblers are able to grapple prey and expel large spore clouds from their bodies, which cause acidic burns on the skin of prey. When killed, the spores explode, releasing a final burst of cordyceps into the air. You don't want to get close to that one, but the bloaters are the final stage that we see officially alive in this universe for The Last of Us Part 1. And they're over 20 years old, transformed. They mostly have been abandoned, so they've just been going bigger and bigger and bigger, and they've been, like, pretty strong.
Guess they're gonna hold it for long. That don't sound good.
What the fuck is that?
It's a goddamn bloater!
Bloaters have been infected for several years. The fungus has led them to become slow and blind, yet incredibly strong and resilient, with the fungal growth serving as armor plating. Bloaters can also tear fungus from their bodies to use as spore bombs and throw them at their enemies. However, this additional fungal growth makes them vulnerable to fire. The last final stage, that is after death, is just the decomposition of the bodies. Essentially, once an infected dies, their bodies start to disintegrate, but they release spores now, because the only live ones that produced spores were the bloaters and shamblers. Now dead, everyone can produce a bit of spores so that it infects even more people. And that's just so fun. Who wouldn't want to be infected after that? And I hear you say, Gingerly, you're missing one. You're forgetting one. I am not. I'm just keeping it last. Because in The Last of Us Part 2, there's an even bigger enemy that we encounter, bigger than the Shambler. bigger than the bloater, and it's called the Rat King. Essentially, it happens when rats get so bundled up in an environment that their tails get tangled and they get stuck in that way, and then they die, and it's called a Rat King. And in this universe, Abby stumbles onto a very secluded, abandoned part of a hospital, and she finds the Rat King. And it's the same concept. It's essentially a bunch of stalker clickers, runners, and a huge ass bloater that pretty much fused together to create this horrifying image. I did not draw that one because it's pretty unique on its own. The concepts of this creature is also very cool. We can see how we can't really tell what it is. We can just say that it's big, it's intimidating, and you don't want to get near that. The Rat King is a unique stage of infected that developed in the Seattle hospital after over 20 years of infection. Formed from several infected combining into one, the Rat King is colossal in strength and size, and able to take extensive damage from fire, bombs, and guns. Even after taking much damage, it does not die, but instead, its various infected parts will start to break off from the larger mass and attack along with it. And those are all the stages. So it's pretty goddamn disgusting. And yeah, that's all about the Cordiceps and infected. And voila. This is my appreciation of The Last of Us, all the concepts in this universe. I'm honestly really excited to see what they're gonna do for the season 2 of this HBO series. And there's also rumors that there's gonna be a part 3 of The Last of Us in the game universe. I absolutely love how it's going. I love the realism of it, how it can feel as if it could actually exist, and it's driving my creativity immensely. And with this video, you have been able to see the whole progress of how a human becomes infected with this cordyceps. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye bye!